Our meeting to order. Today is Monday, April 13th, and this is a Cedar Rapids Community School District regular Board of Education meeting along with a work session. Thank you for joining us on this.
Specifically around equity, so that we live out what it is to be socially just and an equitable district. So at this time, I'm going to stop rambling and ask Mr. Edwin Javius to come to the podium.
Good evening, Madam President, board members, Dr. Benson. I'm excited to be here. After having a conversation with Dr. Benson to kind of like highlight some of the courageous acts that the district is embarked on in regards to making the district inclusive for all kids, to ensure all means all, I would like to spend a little bit of time just kind of sharing who we are as a company, as well as kind of walk through some things that will add more clarity in terms of educational equity. You had two board members go to Tennessee and have good food, but probably in addition to having good food, probably just across the nation, the number one issue that's facing 21st century schools is this whole idea of equity and social justice, and how do we close the multitude of gaps that exist in high-performing schools, districts, and low-performing school districts. I come to you as a practitioner, had the pleasure of being a high school world history teacher, elementary principal, high school vice principal, district office employee, and since 2001, the CEO, president of EDEquity. We have the pleasure of working in 12 states and supporting high-performing school districts and low-performing school districts, improving leadership and instructional practice. And I share that with you because one of the things that we're finding across the nation is that we have focused a tremendous amount of time on educational outcomes for youngsters and less time on the antecedents that has caused the educational outcome. So as the district and EDEquity has engaged in this work, we are trying to improve the adult performance so the little kids can show off like they did here. I always say testing time for little kids is to show off to your teacher how smart you are, So what I would like to do, and you have a packet of information, is just a couple of artifacts that we have used to support not only the measurable outcomes, because sometimes educational equity become a nebulous term. And what does that really look like in a high-performing school district? So we are using measurable outcomes to identify how do we get better as a system. So what I'm going to do is just kind of walk through who we are, go through the packet a little bit, and walk us through an activity. And I would love to have this be very participatory. So if you want to ask a question now or before the end of the presentation, feel free to for clarification and just presentation flow. Feel free. So hopefully you guys do high-tech stuff here, so hopefully I get this thing right. No, I didn't. Okay. One of the things I just wanted to share with you is a quote by Asa Hilliard. And this is what we're finding in school districts across the nation, that there's nothing new in education. There's actually nothing new to get African-American kids, Latino kids, poor white kids to learn. There's absolutely nothing new. And I think Nancy indicated, this hurdles indicated is the will, and I think Gary indicated the will to want to take the courageous steps to do the work. So Asa Hilliard talks about, do we have the will to do the work? All we know about education, they work. There's nothing new. Bloom taxonomy, it's all coming back. Madeline Hunter, everything's coming back. All of these things are coming back like the afro. No, I'm just kidding. So there's really nothing new in education. Is our ability to tackle the hard issues in school. And the hard issue in school is do we look at every kid with the idea of I'm going to give him access to unlimited potential in my classroom? That is the will in which we have to that's our 1 degree in Cedar Rapids. It's the will to see that all means all. All means all. So Asa here talks about there are no pedagogical barriers to teaching and learning when adults are made available for youngsters. So that has been kind of our cornerstone is about, and we're even reading that as a professional read, the will to lead, the skill to teach. That is so apropos in the work, okay, in the work. We're one of the nation's premier educational consultant firms that just focus on educational equity. And what do we mean by educational equity is improving the quality of instruction for all kids. Improving the quality of instruction for all kids, which aligns to the instructional vision of the district of the characteristics of effective instruction. So how do we ensure that every teacher improve their practice, that it reaches every single kid in our classroom? And one of the courageous steps that we're taking in Cedar Rapids is that if the data is asking us to have a courageous conversation about black students, we're saying black students. We're saying Latino students. We're saying poor white students. We're saying gifted kids. As I always share in our philosophy, equity doesn't mean black and brown. It means everyone. Because as we start looking at the data across the nation, some of our top kids have regressed to the mean. Mm-hmm. And they're not bumping up against excellence. So that's an equitable action that needs to be addressed as well. How do we continue to move our top kids, if you will? So one of the things that we do is try to eliminate that gap. And the gap isn't comparing black and white, it's comparing kids to excellence. Comparing kids to the ceiling, as opposed to racial comparisons. We've been in the business, again, since 2001. We've learned some things along the way. We're research founded, research based. This work around equity and culture is not a new fad. Old educators and learning theorists like Vygotsky, Piaget, Forstein have actually introduced how kids make meaning. And what we've done is basically utilize what the research has shown to say, how do we get better as an organization? The proof is in the data. What we're finding is there is a threshold in our organization, and we found that if there is direct services, and we found that direct services around 10 to 11 days of direct service on a campus, we see measurable results. We see measurable results. In regards to really doing the systemic work as opposed to, I hate to use this term, drive-bys. Drive-by professional development, especially around engaging staff, around culture, race, and language, could be counterproductive to the culture. So being able to really engage staffs and allow them to process what it means, as Carl would say, to maximize the diversity in the district. Jefferson looks different than when he went. So how do we look at Jefferson's difference being a solution as opposed to a problem? And that has kind of been taboo in schools. Really having that hard conversation about culture, race, and socioeconomics. So that whole piece is what we do, and we support through various service models. We have 4 critical areas that we're working in your district in. One is the opportunity to coach Ken has been a delight for me. One of the things he coached me in is that he showed me where the barber shop was here, so that's always good. You know, Sweetie Pies is a good place to eat if you haven't gone. No, it's good. So, but it gives us an opportunity to have a gradual release plan. My job is to work myself out of a job. If I'm here too long, that means that things are not holding on, if you will. Okay, not holding on. We're doing site level support in 3 schools right now, and that's Washington High School, Roosevelt, and Hoover. We just finished, just earlier today, principal in IDS and counselors training around looking at how do we operationalize an equity action plan and what is the courage and the steps needed to have these courageous conversations on school sites and still maintain the culture. I don't say maintain the culture because if we maintain the culture, we're going to get the same results. How to enhance the culture to make it more culturally inclusive for every student, And which is the delight also is working with your equity diversity committee and being able to walk on campus and giving your community members the language to go in schools to offer positive feedback to what they see. That has been, and I'm going to say this as a person who travels the nation, not many school districts are having community members walk on campuses and give feedback to teachers and administrators. So Cedar Rapids is one of the only few school districts that are courageous enough to allow the community members to walk the halls and provide thank you cards to teachers for best practices being seen. We also have conversations too about what we didn't see, but it's not in a threatening mode. I think Tying had an opportunity to walk with us, and which brings about, how do we get better? How do we get on the ground and really get better as a school system? Our philosophy on educational equity is that educational equity is the belief that if we have deliberate actions to close the multitude of gaps, that becomes the driving force of the organization. If we know that we have gaps in teaching and learning, student outcomes, how do we action plan that with measurable outcomes? That should be the driving force of the organization. Through the strategic plan process, as well as the formation of the equity plan, complements actually the strategic plan. And you have a copy of the equity action plan in your packet that has identified 6 key areas in which to support the strategic plan, What do we mean by equity? All right. And I tried to simplify it as much as I can, again, is giving kids what they need. So as you look at the box here, as we talk about equity, you see 3 kids trying to look over to see the baseball game. And if we were engaged in equality, I just see them the same. That would be coined the phrase. I just see them as the same. That means the smaller kid would not get access to seeing the game. Does that make sense? As you look at, maybe I have to give 2 boxes to a student, and I use this phrase quite frequently too. Okay, all the kids are going to have shoes, but the shoes have to fit. They may be different size shoes. So as we start to engage in this work, it's called equity. It is around possibly giving kids what they need to gain access to high quality instruction. High quality instruction, not mediocre instruction. High quality instruction for every kid. So as we start to really wrap our conversation around equity, we did about 2 hours about clarifying the equity piece so we can go back to the school site and have teachers not question what is this about, but how do we make sure that everyone gets access? Everyone gets access. One of the things that we say and this is through the research from Carol Dweck out of Stanford, 75% of closing the racial achievement gap in schools, it's mindset, 25% strategies. What I believe in the kid is just as important as what I do with the kid. And that work is there's getting some great research out of Stanford about transforming mindset. I think one of the board members had a book that talked about student resiliency. Student resiliency, and that work about resiliency is critical. How do we have kids, do kids even know what effort is in school? So really kind of defining that so the youngsters will know how to replicate resiliency and effort. And do our teachers have resiliency? How do we continue to do that as well? Again, 25% mindset, 75% mindset, 25% strategies. What I believe, what I do. What I believe and what I do. And that conversation about what I believe is, what do I believe about the kids on the west side may be different than the kids on the east side? What do I believe in from those kids who come from the apartment complex and those who come from the gated community? Having our teachers being willing and having our leaders being willing to engage that conversation as a solution and not so much a problem is our 1 degree. I believe it's our 1 degree. The conversation I had with Dr. Benson in Naperville, Naperville, was really around, we are really, really good with 85% to 90% of our babies. We're not as good with maybe 10% of our population. How do we close that gap? How do we close that gap? In addition to keeping the kids high. Again, the definition of equity, giving kids what they need. Giving kids what they need so they can gain access to rigorous content. I don't want to give kids, I don't want to love them to hopelessness. I want to love them to grade level and beyond. Grade level and beyond. So that whole idea of, having unlimited expectations for kids, it's really about how am I going to prep as a teacher to make sure that I am skilled enough to get my kids there. How do I get my kids there? This is what we say about equity. Equity is the process, equality is the outcome. We want all the kids to see the game. How do we get the kids to all see the game? May be different for certain kids. Okay? May be different for certain kids. And that may be rooted in instructional approach. That may be rooted in after-school tutoring. That may be rooted in, how do I say this? I may have to call on him twice in class, or 3 times, or 4 times. That is what we mean by that additional resource. Based on the state of Iowa, resources are not as plentiful, which is trying times. California's been there. California's been there, so that's just trying times. So not only we're going to have to give resource, we're going to have to also continue to make sure that the promising practice that our teachers have, they get replicated. Get replicated, and that's the great work from the instructional division as well. The greatest barrier to learning is not what the student knows, it's what the teacher believes. The greatest barrier to learning is not what the student knows, what the teacher believes. And that's a hard pill to swallow sometimes if you're a teacher. Because are you saying that what I believe in you, Edwin, is the most important part of school? That's what the researchers show. The self-fulfilling prophecy, the Pygmalion effect, that's pretty founded research, That has been kind of our approach of working with the district, but I just want to share this one thing and I'll open up to comments. I just want to ask the board members this. What happens at 212 degrees? Extra credit if you try. What happens at 212 degrees Fahrenheit? 212 degrees Fahrenheit, something happens. Water boils, okay, water boils. What happens at 211?
Liquid.
What happens at 211 degrees Fahrenheit? It's just hot.
Yeah.
Okay, it's just hot. And I share this with the instructional division. We don't have to transform 5 degrees. We have to transform 1 degree. What is that 1 degree that will change matter in our district? The 1 degree. 211, we're hot. 212 changes matter. And that changing the matter is our ability in the will to implement equity for all. So I just kind of want to open it up.
Edwin, I've been quoted as saying the teacher leadership program in Iowa is the most promising educational reform I've seen in my career. going back to A Nation at Risk. Can you talk to the board a little bit about the work you see our teacher leaders doing and how your work plays into that?
Absolutely. It's interesting that I shared this morning one of the most promising, among a multitude of promising practices in the district, is the teacher leader, the coaching of teachers is one of the strongest in your district, one of the strongest in the state, if not the nation. Our ability to go in classes and coach up. And one of the things that we would like to, we are supporting the district is how do we add a cultural lens to what coaches bring to the classroom as well. So we're mirroring the teacher leader continuum and the evaluation to say, not only am I a good practitioner, but I'm also culturally conscious of understanding how culture, race, language interacts in the classroom. So our coaches getting better at engaging that conversation. They're willing. They're excited by it. It doesn't hurt. And you see your IDS is doing a real good job of that.
Questions and comments, John?
Edwin, I read through the evaluations and they're tremendous. I mean, this is great, and I'm assuming that these were from the administrators and counselors, and there were some questions about how do we get this out to the rest of the staff. So can you just talk to us a little bit more where this is going for the rest of the staff?
Absolutely. It's one-day workshop, but we had actually did a great workshop with Ralph's school at Washington as well as Hoover and Roosevelt. So we have those evals. So we're moving the work to ground zero.
Okay.
You know, we're moving the work to ground zero. We want to go slow to go fast, and then there's capacity issues and stuff like that. But the goal is to support the IDSs as well as do, I don't want to say triage, but do targeted schools so we can find some best practices that can be replicated.
And
John, for
in
me-
addition, we will have, during our pre-service next school year, with the calendar just being determined, Edwin has already, he's going to entertain the fact that we would like him here all 4 days, and we would like to get him in front of all teachers in our district. That has not happened yet, so that will happen during pre-service next year.
And
How's the weather during that? No, just kidding.
it's not bad. The theory of action and the work that the Equity Committee has done this year in identifying strands for us to go forward and the accountability structures that are built into that. I'm real excited about that. This is something I've been asking for and haven't had it because you've been pushing me as a board for how do we know what are the steps, how can I as a board ask intelligent questions about where we're going. And I think that construct will provide that.
Nancy?
You had mentioned that you provide site-level support. Could you share with me a little bit what that entails?
Absolutely. Based on the school's improvement plan, they have certain goals that they've identified to help move their school along and close any gaps that they may have, is that we work with the principals in developing what are some key things within their site plan that we can support with professional development. So that work is really around the professional development, either with their IDS and coaching or working with the entire staff in an in-service. I know we've done a couple of in-service where we've had the entire Washington staff actually in training and lesson design and how do you infuse, how do you design culturally responsive lessons for all kids, and more importantly, just the dialogue of new information. Because being able to have conversation about culture and equity and race, that needs to be processed. I'm not sure how much practice Iowans have at that, in a school setting. I'm not sure. I'm sure we've had some conversations, but in a school setting, what impact does that have is a critical part of the professional development. So we create a safe environment for teachers to not know, but not be okay not knowing.
Okay, other questions? John?
So a lot of this obviously has impact in the schools and the students, the teachers, the staff. But what about the family and the parents? This is the question that we keep getting asked all the time. What role do we have in helping them and bringing them into this process? And what can we expect to give to them or help them in their journey through understanding, you know, their children's success in school?
Absolutely. In the Equity Action Plan, there's a strong community parent piece of where we're reaching out and developing structures, safe structures, so when the parents do come, they're not intimidated by the system, if you will. And how do we create different type of parent satellites, parent involvement satellites at our school sites? So now not only your typical PTA parent shows up, it's really a cultural mix of parents that can participate with the principal and be able to have things met. So that's a critical part of the Equity Action Plan that will be rolling out, and then that part will be adopted by the school sites.
Great, thank you.
Other comments or questions? So how do we drive this into teacher prep at the college level? I mean, this is such an important topic that it should be part of our regular course of study for aspiring teachers.
The ivory tower, huh? No, just kidding. This is what we've done this is what we've asked in Georgia. This is what we've asked in Georgia. If we don't somewhat adjust to the teacher efficacy rubric of what we require teachers to come as part of their skill sets or their tools, we'll always have to do that prep work here. So what we're doing is supporting in Georgia, the university, and saying, can we take a look at your prep courses and how do we add culturally responsiveness as a critical component there? So when they come, we're not starting at zero if they're coming from, you know, Morehouse or Spelman or something of that nature. So teacher prep folks, how do I say this? There's a lot of books out there. They haven't strongly wanted to modify their current way of doing business. Not right now. So it's kind of almost up to us to add that lens. And then we get these youngsters who are coming to us just blown away from being in Iowa, but being in an urban Iowa school, if you can call it urban.
I just think that's such an important conversation, because are you telling me that across the nation in all teacher prep programs, they omit this type of instruction?
It's not, how do I say, I don't want to say it's omitted, but it's not explicitly stated.
Okay.
You know, so what will happen, they'll have a course that says all kids, and then that's it. As opposed to really explicitly stating, this is how you're going to leave here being culturally competent as an instructor. We're as a nation, we're still kind of struggling with that.
Thank you for your work in the district. I did attend a meeting in December. I know Nancy was on the diversity committee the first year it was formed, and Rosenthal, who's joining us later tonight, is currently on that committee as well. So I know you're at it. I know you're working on it. Can any of our board members do an equity walk with you? Are there any upcoming in this rest of the school year? May 6th at Franklin. So can we join you? Absolutely. What time is that?
Can I say no? No, just kidding. Of course. Just kidding.
We won't support you anymore.
Just one thought on this. You know, we do have some power as the Urban Education Network. We as a school, you know, community within the state of Iowa have the same sort of needs, what we're talking about in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And I'm wondering if, maybe this is happening, but we need to pull together, Edwin, and some of the other school leaders across the state in urban districts and our teacher prep program leaders and say, we expect change. We're your client. We're going to hire your product, your student teachers. This is what we expect of them. as urban districts in Iowa.
And I know that the Department of Education is the one that puts a stamp on approval for teacher prep programs across the state. I think that Dr. Buck maybe will help us facilitate that conversation at the department level. So, yeah, we're all for that. So, thank you.
Thank
and
you.
Safe travels back to California.
I'm here for a little bit.
Okay.
I brought the California weather, I tell you.
Yes, you
Yeah,
did.
that's great.
We
Thank you.
appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank